It's July 7th, 2022, and 6 years ago in Dallas, Texas, 5 officers were ambushed, gunned down, and murdered by a monster at a BLM protest. And I have some final thoughts. Today, July 7th, belongs to these men: Officer Ahrens, Officer Kroll, Officer Smith, Officer Thompson, and Officer Zamaripa. Today marks the day those 5 brave and heroic law enforcement officers were killed and 7 other officers wounded in an ambush during a Black Lives Matter protest in Dallas, Texas, by a shooter who unabashedly set out to kill white cops in the name of BLM. I was in Dallas when this tragedy went down, and I still get chills thinking about it. If you'll recall, and the mainstream media will do their damnedest to prevent you from recalling, this massacre occurred during a Black Lives Matter protest in the summer of 2016. The shooter set out to kill white cops, plain and simple. And if that anti-police rhetoric sounds familiar, it's because it's only worsened in the last 6 years. It hit a fever pitch in the George Floyd riot season of summer 2020. The war on cops is real, and it's being stoked, or at the very least excused, by the Democrat Party and the mainstream media at large. This is what happens when Democrat leaders from the top down placate to Marxist and anarchist groups like BLM, whose transparent mission is to defund police. And it's not just defunding. It's a multi-step process. Demoralize officers, decriminalize acts of lawlessness, defund police, and demonize the badge. Add all those D's up, including the D for Democrat, and you get a war on cops. Think I'm exaggerating? Listen to this so-called civil rights attorney on MSNBC, Charles Coleman, try to explain, excuse, and legitimize this already deadly year for law enforcement.
Now, earlier this year, the FBI director noted that 73 law enforcement officers were killed in the line of duty last year, the highest number since the 9/11 attacks. I know this is sort of apples and oranges, but when you look at the totality of all these things going on, and you're talking about these cultural problems versus training problems, I mean, what are your comments on this new data?
My comment is this is very simple. At a certain point, there's only but so much peace that's going to be had. Unfortunately, when you don't understand the notion of protest, when you don't understand the notion of asking nicely, unfortunately, there are people who are going to decide that this is the way to respond. And so this what you're seeing, that report that you just described, that's the result of years and years and years of pleading for being able to approach law enforcement and engage law enforcement with basic standards of dignity and humanity. And there's only but so many times that you're going to be able to violate people's civil rights, their human rights, their dignity, their humanity before they respond in a different manner than they already have.
What you just heard is a prime example of why we have a war on cops. Thugs, degenerates, cop haters, and cop killers are not only fed the false and race-baited narrative of widespread systemic racism in policing, but they are dog whistled to by jackasses like that Charles Coleman, and told attacks on law enforcement are to be expected or even understood. No, I won't allow it. And I hope all the decent Americans listening to this will take a stand and not allow it either. Law enforcement is not a job. It's a calling. But when we as a culture perpetuate the anti-cop narrative and back it up with anti-cop policies to the point where protecting and serving becomes nearly impossible, don't be surprised when fewer brave souls want to answer that call. These men and women of law enforcement are more than just a badge and a blue uniform. They are parents, children, brothers, sisters, husbands, and wives that just want to serve their duty and return home safely to their loved ones each night. And in a time when proper parenting has become as scarce as toilet paper in March 2020, our officers are tasked to be babysitters, therapists, essential workers, mass police, and punching bags for people and communities who need them, but proudly and vocally hate them at the same time. Yet, they still hold the line, running towards danger as others run away. And though polls show the majority of Americans support police and oppose defunding them, the anti-cop rhetoric continues on a daily basis in Congress, in the White House, and all across the media. The longer this goes on and the longer those of us who support law enforcement remain silent, the closer we get to another ambush, another attack, another Dallas. And sadly, we've become so used to it that most Americans don't bat an eyelash as our officers are gunned down or assaulted in our streets. Even ardent supporters of law enforcement likely can't remember even a single name of an officer who paid the ultimate price, not even one of the 178 we've lost so far this year. Look, we can't change the way the left treats and talks about the badge. We might not be able to show those who love to hate our officers the error of their ways, but we can try and we can lead by example. We can also pray God puts a blanket of protection around our law enforcement officers every single time they put on that badge and uniform. You officers are the underappreciated who must do the unimaginable and see the unthinkable to protect the ungrateful. And one day I know many will hang their heads in shame when they finally wake up and realize the evil they defended and even celebrated and the heroes they ridiculed. So on this 6-year anniversary of what was a horrible and deadly day for law enforcement, I sincerely thank all of you who continue to hold that thin but mighty line between good and evil. Those are my final thoughts from Nashville. God bless and take care.